is like what's good with federal people. They just know when they're to be back.
Done it too many times.
Well, you're used to federal judges. That's the problem.
That's true. Crack that word.
That's right. We only dream of that. Honestly,
Nice courtroom, though. I've been in some weird courtrooms. It's been crazy.
it used to be bigger. It used to go all the way up.
Oh, right.
When I first got to town, yeah.
They build that room on for you?
That whole wing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. This is previously admitted, and this is previously admitted in 790. Thanks for asking. Okay.
Everybody rise for the jury, please. Okay, we can be seated. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Eicher, we talked a lot about the mapping and locations, but did you also do an analysis of the call logs and text logs and the phone records as well?
Yes, sir, I did.
And are those the phone records that have been previously admitted as People's 42, 44, 46 for Dylan and Mark Redwine's cellular phones?
Yes, they are.
Now, you testified in conjunction with the mapping that the last outgoing communication from Dylan's device ever was at 8:07 p.m. on November 18th, 2012. You recall that?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I'd like to approach with a separate exhibit. This is previously admitted as People's Exhibit 35. What I'm going to, may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
What I'm going to approach you with, sir, is a exhibit that documents an app called Text Plus and the last communications on November 18th, 2012. I know this isn't a document that you're terribly familiar with, but it's been already admitted. I'm just going to ask you a single question on it. Based on this being Pacific Standard Time and looking at the time of the last communication out on there at 20:37 hours, what time is it exactly?
So that's Pacific Standard Time, so that is 9:37 our time. Mountain Time, I should say.
The last communication indicated on this Text Plus.
Correct.
We have 8:07, 9:37. Have you seen the landline records for the defendant's home in this case?
I have.
So we talked about Dylan had a cellular phone. We talked about Dylan had an iPod with a Text Plus app. And now there was also a landline that was up and running at the home at the time.
Yes, sir.
May I approach this People's Exhibit 334, Your Honor?
Yes.
So, Mr. Eicher, 334 has also been previously admitted, so I'm going to jump right into talking about it, and I'm going to put it up on the screen as well. So does this capture the landline number phone records from November 18th of 2012 to November 20th of 2012?
Yes, it does.
And is the landline number itself 970-884-2395.
Yes, it is.
And does this?
Counsel, approach this for a second.
Yes. So that number is listed on the top of the records, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then in conjunction with that, does this look similar to CenturyLink records that you've seen before in your work?
Yes, sir.
So the pertinent point of time, you have enough information about the investigation to know that the pertinent period of time we're talking about is the evening of November 18th, when we've heard 8:07 and 9:37, and then into the morning of the 19th, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk to the jury about these phone records. What is the phone activity from November 18th, 2012 from the landline?
There's several different calls coming into the phone number.
Let me actually blow it up if I can. Is that a little better?
I can see it.
So I'm going to use the cursor here for a second. And can you see the cursor on the screen?
Yes, sir.
So these dates right here, they look a little funny, right? But does it say November 18th and then you just do at the end? But this would be the pertinent month and date.
Yes, that's November 18th, 2012.
So how many calls are there on November 18th of 2012?
2.
And are those incoming or outgoing calls?
They are both outgoing calls. As you can see, the phone number, this is the phone number's records. And phone number means it's an outgoing call to these 2 numbers here. Both.
And that's sorry. Is that in military time?
Yes, it is.
So when we look at the second call and the final call of November 18th, 2012, is that going to be 9:54 a.m.?
That is. Yes, that's correct.
Any other calls that day from that landline based on your review of the record?
No.
Based on your review of the cell phone mapping, is this well prior to Dylan Redwine arriving at the airport?
Yes, it is.
Moving on to November 19th, how many calls are there on November 19th of 2012 from that operational landline at the defendant's residence?
There's 2.
Are those incoming or outgoing?
One's incoming and one's outgoing.
And are you looking at the numbers on the left to see that information?
That's correct. So the 19th, that's from actually Mark's cell phone number to his home number. And then this one here, on the 19th, is from this 970-385-2900 to his home phone.
Okay. So one call is incoming from Mark's cell phone to his landline?
That's correct.
And what's the other call? Which way?
It's from a 970 number ending in 2900 to the home phone.
So are they both incoming based on the from number?
That's correct.
Okay. So when you look at the time from the call from his cell phone, and I think I can see it from here, is it 4:42?
Yes, 4:42 p.m. or 16:42 military time, and then 8:49 p.m.
Okay.
20:49.
So the 4:42, is that consistent when he was down in the Bayfield area, perhaps at the Bayfield Marshals, for example?
Yes.
And then the 20:49, is that going to be 8:49 p.m.?
Yes.
Is that the last usage of that phone that night?
Yes.
And when is it used again on the 20th?
The next call is an incoming call at 9:45 in the morning on the 20th.
So no outgoing calls at all on November 19th of 2012.
Correct.
And then in terms of phone usage from whomever was at the home, there's a period of time of at least, is it 13 hours through the night of the 19th that phone's not used?
From the 18th to the 19th?
I'm sorry, the first night Dylan's missing, from the 19th to the 20th. What's the last time that phone's used on the 19th?
Well, there's a call on 18th at 9 in the morning. The 19th, the next one is at 4:42 in the afternoon. And then 8 o'clock in the evening. And now from the 19th into the 20th, so we're going from 8:49 p.m. to 9:45 a.m. to the 20th.
So no phone activity between that window of time, that first night that Dylan's reported missing?
That's correct.
I want to move on to talking about Mark Redwine's work phone briefly. So you had said you could see all those records in the ComNet towers because of the roaming activity?
That's correct.
We also looked at those records too?
Yes, it did.
Were there any calls to Dylan Redwine noted on that phone at all?
No calls between his work cell phone and Dylan's cell phone.
And with his work cell phone, any calls or texts on that evening of the 19th into the 20th at all?
No.
So he just wasn't using that phone?
That's correct.
I want to turn your attention to Mark Redwine's AT&T personal phone call and text history.
Okay.
If you could grab a seat, sir, I'm going to bring you a couple of new exhibits. Your Honor, may I approach with People's Exhibit 79 and People's Exhibit 80?
Yes.
Sir, I still have those in the plastic sleeves, but could you take a look at 79 and 80, and we'll be working with them if you want to take them out. Have you seen those documents before?
Yes, sir. These are the original AT&T records for Mr. Redwine's phone.
And was one of them People 79, the voice calls?
Yes, list of the voice calls, and then 80 was text messages. They're separate documents.
Okay. When you receive the records, are they in big packets worth electronically? Like if you were to print them, is it many, many pages?
Yes, there's, I think, 130 pages or something to that effect, covering all dates and times and voice, text, and data.
Did these limit that time frame to more about the time frame we're talking about on the 18th, 19th, 20th, et cetera?
Yes, this is just a section of those larger records.
Are there some highlights on those records as well, just to help you navigate them?
Yes, sir.
So the 8032 note. So the 8032 number, for example, that we talked about, and the 5448 number, you can readily identify those on these records?
Yes, Mark's and Dylan's phones, yes.
And then are there yellow highlights on there to capture where the communications are to Dylan?
Yes.
And then are there green highlights on there that capture the last use on the night of the 19th and the first use on the morning of the 20th?
Yes.
Are those fair and accurate summaries of the records that you reviewed in their entirety?
Yes, these are the actual records.
Thank you. I'd move to admit People 79 and 80 into evidence at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Moran? They're admitted.
So let's start with People 79, sir. This, again, is going to be voice calls, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to talk to you about that night of the 19th into the 20th. And if I could publish, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So, sir, I'm going to start on page 2, and I'm also going to see if I can get this a little bit bigger on the screen. I know this is still going to be small for the jury, so I am going to ask you to use whichever copy you prefer, whether it's the one on your desktop, or would you rather stand and use the pointer?
I'll stand and use the pointer.
Okay, great. Judge Mahey? Thank you. So in yellow, what's highlighted in yellow on this document?
These are phone calls between Mark's, his father's cell phone ending in 8032 and Dylan's cell phone ending in 448.
I'm going to back up to the first page because this starts on November 19th, correct?
That's correct.
Back up to that first page. Are there any yellow highlights at all?
No, there's no calls highlighted here.
And this is from the 17th to the 18th of 2012?
That's correct. You can see the dates and times here, and this is in local time on this document. So we're seeing November 17th, 18th, in the morning of the 19th.
And does that indicate any calls from the defendant to Dylan Redwine?
No.
Moving down to page 2, has this document highlighted the calls to Dylan Redwine?
Yes, these are incoming and outgoing calls for, to Dylan's phone. The first one that's highlighted is November 19th at 2:24 p.m.
And when you look at these calls, you said incoming and outgoing, but if you look down the columns, can you tell us if all of the calls are originating from the defendant's phone just based on the phone numbers?
Yes, and it's easy to pick it out if you guys are looking at this document later on. This is originating number, and this is terminating number. Originating number is the one that's making the call. Terminating number is the one that's receiving it. So all the ones that are highlighted here indicate that Mark's phone was calling Dylan's phone. So originating, terminating.
So he calls Dylan several times on the 19th. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And as you scroll down on time, as we get down, what is the first time that he calls Dylan?
2:24 p.m.
And as you scroll down a little lower, to the, well, let's go to right to the bottom. What's the last highlight on this page?
7:34 p.m.
And that's again still on November 19th, 2012?
That's correct.
Moving on to the next page as well, are there both yellow and green highlights here?
Yes, sir.
And we talked about the yellow highlights indicate the 5448 number. If you look closely, it just makes it easier to find them.
Correct. This one is not 5448, the first one here, but the second one is.
I see. What is the time of the second one? So that's a mistake with that highlight, right, on the first one?
Yes, sir.
But on the second one, that's highlighted because it is an outgoing call to Dylan Redwine's phone?
Yes, the one at 7:19 a.m. on the 20th is an outgoing call from Mark's phone to Dylan's phone.
Okay. You said this is local time?
That is correct.
So you're aware just generally from the investigation that Dylan was reported missing on the 19th, roughly around 4:30?
Yes.
And then that was the first night that his whereabouts were unknown?
That's correct.
I'm going to go back to the previous page. Since this skipped to the 20th from the 19th, I'm going to go back to the previous page. What is the last time that the defendant attempts to call Dylan Redwine on the night of November 19th?
7:34 p.m.
And what is the next time that the defendant tries to call Dylan Redwine's phone?
Here it is on the next page on the 20th, 7:19 a.m.
So roughly 12 hours overnight, first night he's missing, the defendant doesn't attempt to call him.
That's correct.
Now the green highlight denotes something different, correct?
Correct.
Does this denote the last use of the phone for voice calls on November 19th and the first use of the phone for voice calls on November 20th?
Yes, it's indicating that any calls, whether it's to Dylan or from Dylan's phone, either from Mark's phone to Dylan's phone or Mark's phone to any other phone. These are the last call. This is the last call on the evening of the 19th, so that's at 10:37 p.m. And the next call is not till 7:19 in the morning on the next day.
So for that window of time from 10:37 p.m. to 7:19 a.m. the first night that Dylan's missing, does the defendant use his phone for any voice calls?
No.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to move on to People's 80 at this time. I think we explained generally what this is, but let's do it to clarify. So People's 80, is this going to be SMS or text communications from the defendant's personal phone?
Yes.
So looking at this, what's highlighted in yellow?
Yes, these are the calls or text messages to and or from Dylan's phone to Mark's cell phone.
And can you take another look at originating number? I think you might have misspoke.
There is a originating number here and terminating. So we do have one call. This is on the 18th at 5:48 p.m. A text message, I should say, from Dylan's phone to Mark's phone. It's about the time he's running to the airport.
Right. Okay, understood. So that 5:48, we talked a lot about that 5:48 in terms of one of the defendant's last communications on the 18th that you had the mapping info at the airport, correct?
Yes.
Any more text messages on the night of the 18th from the defendant's phone?
No.
And then is the yellow capturing all the text messages from the defendant to Dylan Redwine starting back up on the 19th?
Yes, there's no more text messages after 5:48 p.m. on the 18th when Dylan texts his father's phone. The next one's not till November 19th at 8:42 a.m. As highlighted, indicating that Mark's phone is texting Dylan's phone. There's three different texts here: 8:42, 10:15, 11:23. And there's one all the way at 2:33 p.m.
All on the 19th.
All on the 19th.
I'm going to move down to the next page. Let me make sure I didn't move down to the next page. Similarly, are the communications to Dylan's phone indicated on here? It actually looks like there's some yellow highlights here that might not be to Dylan's phone, correct?
Yes, just these are outgoing text messages from his father's phone to another different phone here. And it's specifically like the ready and
Let me approach for a second, sir. Because the highlights have been corrected on the admitted exhibit, Your Honor. So I'm going to just ask the witness to work off the admitted exhibit. All right. So sir, looking at 80, are these all the same yellow highlights that we just explained to the jury?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But on the next page, this page looks a little different than what we saw on the page.
Yes, nothing's highlighted in yellow on that page.
This is more recent version.
Yes.
And then on this, as we look beyond, you had testified to 2:33 p.m. on the 19th, outgoing text from defendant to Dylan Redwine.
Yes.
And then as you look at this, are there any other outgoing texts to Dylan Redwine at all?
No.
And is that why there's no yellow on that page?
That's correct.
But is there green similar to the other exhibit to indicate the last known usage of that phone by the defendant through an outgoing text on the evening of the 19th when Dylan was first missing?
Yes, the last outgoing text by the defendant's phone was on the 19th was 10:52 p.m. That's actually not highlighted.
Is it an outgoing?
It is an outgoing text from, remember, this is Mark's phone. There's an outgoing text at 10:52 p.m. on the 19th.
Okay. And then what about the next morning on the 20th? What's the next use outgoing? Because it's text messages, right? So you could receive a text message, but what's the next outgoing text message?
I apologize. I was looking at my answer to the last question was incorrect. So let me look at, I was looking at the wrong column. The last outgoing text by the defendant's phone was at 9:31 p.m., and that is highlighted in green there.
Okay. So
On the 19th, I apologize.
So on the 19th, first night Dylan's missing, 9:32 is the last use of the phone in terms of text messages.
Correct.
And then what's the next use of the phone in terms of text messages? Is that indicated in green on the exhibit?
It is, and that is at 12:56 p.m. on the 20th, so the next afternoon.
So again, after 9-something at night, no outgoing text messages or any kind of active use by the defendant with that phone until noon on the 20th.
That's correct.
So in considering the information, I think you already talked about the work phone, right? And there weren't any communications that evening on the work phone.
Correct.
You talked about the landline. There weren't any communications on the landline.
That's correct.
Ask and answer. We don't need to rehash this.
You can finish up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. So based on all the devices the defendant had, his work phone, his cell phone, which could text and call, and his landline, did the defendant make any communications from the hours of roughly 10 to 7 or 10:30 to 7 the first night that his son was missing?
Ask and answer repeatedly.
You can answer the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Considering all the defendant's devices, the night that search and rescue was called in and his son was missing, did the defendant have any phone activity whatsoever from roughly 10-something till 7-something the next morning?
No, there was no activity on any of the devices.
And then after that, in those first days of the search, there was one phone call to Dylan Redwine, I believe, on 7:19 a.m. on the 20th.
That's correct.
Other than that, any attempts to call Dylan Redwine over those next several days?
No.
Any attempts to text Dylan Redwine over those next several days?
No.
And any attempts from the landline on the records you've seen to call Dylan Redwine?
No.
So if he was sitting by the phone, he wasn't doing much with it.
Correct.
Objection argumentative.
It
Move to
is.
strike.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't consider that last answer. That is an argument that prosecution can make in closing if they want to.
So I asked you about Mark Redwine's phone. Now let's talk about Dylan Redwine's phones. In summary, we've talked about a landline, talked about an iPod, talked about a cell phone.
And we're talking about
Dylan Redwine.
Dylan, okay.
We know what we just discussed what Mark did and didn't do with his devices. Let's talk about Dylan's.
Okay.
So we have a cellular phone that has text message and phone call capability. We have an active landline, right, that we know from the records was in action on the 19th.
That's correct.
And then we have as well an iPod.
That's correct.
After, from your review of everything, including the previously admitted exhibits I showed you, did Dylan Redwine ever use any of these devices after 9:37 p.m.?
No.
And by 9:56 p.m., where was location information putting Dylan Redwine?
The phone was still using that tower just north of the reservoir and near the father's residence.
And from your review, after he stopped using his cell phone at 8:07, that time at 8:07 was also defendant's residence / Middle Mountain Road area.
That's correct.
So based on all of that, were there also some incoming calls that triggered that roaming activity you talked about?
Yes.
And some texts that he had not responded to?
Yes, there was text from Ryan Nava and his mother.
And when you say text from his mother, was that phone able to capture the last text that was received by the device ever in time?
The network captured the data.
When did the network catch the data for the last
communication that device received?
I believe it was 10:09.
Was that the text from his mother that said, "How are you, son? Doing okay?"
Yes, it was.
Objection, I don't think he has this information.
It's in the phone records, Judge.
I think he does. I think it's all testified to.
He's refusing to, testifying to data, not the specific messages.
Right. But I think he also had that other information, is my understanding. So I think it's okay.
The text content is in the phone records, Your Honor.
Okay.
You reviewed that text content from the phone records.
I did.
And is that last call, text message that Dylan Redwine's network ever received at 10:09 p.m. from his mother saying, "How you doing, son? You okay?"
Yes, it is.
Does he ever answer that?
There's no record of him answering that.
Thank you, sir.
Cross?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Eicher, good afternoon, good morning.
Good morning.
How many times did Mr. Redwine message Dylan Redwine by text on the 19th?
Make sure I understand your question. I am looking at text messages only. Is that correct?
I'm going to ask about calls too, but
Okay. Well, I can do one and then the other. Is that all right?
that's not good.
All right. So on the 19th, there were 4 times on the 19th. There was text messages. One was from Dylan's phone to, I'm sorry. They were all from Mark's phone to Dylan's phone on the 19th, 4 of them.
And then on the next page, on the side of the page, previous 24008 discovery, there's some more information about messages from Mark's phone. Total of 8 voice messages, or total of 8 voice calls, total of 8 text messages, right?
Can you show me what you're looking at or direct me to what I'm looking at?
It's your slide number 8.
On,
on it.
I apologize, didn't mean to speak over you. On what exhibit?
The discovery page number is 24008. I think it's probably exhibit 49. It's one of the maps you did that has topography on it.
Okay, that is People's Exhibit 50, page 8 of my report, at discovery page 24008. Am I on the same page as you said?
Please so.
Okay, and I see this is text messages and voice calls, a mixture of connections by Mark's phone to the network.
So he's checking his voicemail, looking at text messages, is that right?
There's text messages, I didn't delineate if they were incoming or outgoing on this slide, but there's voice calls and text messages, and this is Mark's phone between 11:23 and 3:47. But not all of them are to Dylan, which is what you were asking earlier.
Right. So who are those to and from?
I'd have to look at the records for each one, but I can go through that and pick each one out and tell you if they're to Dylan or from Dylan on that date.
Were you able to review messages that showed that not only was Dylan's father trying to reach him, his mom was trying to reach him, the marshal's office was trying to reach Dylan? You aware of all that?
Yes, I know that there are some calls and text messages from Mark's phone to Dylan's phone and from his mother's.
And then on November 20th, 2012,
Turn the microphone towards you, please.
based on your discovery, or what's in discovery page 24010, it's your slide 10. It's another one where there's been topography included on the map. There are 45 calls and text messages from Mr. Redwine on the 20th, right?
That's correct.
And based on your analysis and understanding of this case, those are calls and messages where he's looking for his child, right?
I don't know if he's looking for his child at that point in time. All I know is that there was 45 different connections, text messages and calls on that day between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Or excuse me, 7 a.m., 7:19 a.m. and 8:11 p.m. Sorry about that.
Have you done drive testing or been up on Middle Mountain Road?
I have not.
And based on your expertise with respect to analyzing the way people use cell phones, fair to say that with the advent of cell phones, people are less likely to have memorized phone numbers.
Correct.
So it's more common now that folks rely on their phones so that they can call people. That the number is recorded in a phone, right?
That is correct.
If I could have the prosecution put up slide number 7, please. I suspect 49 or 50. Looks like 49 to me, but I'm not certain. I think 24,070. Or 7, pardon me. Permission to approach?
Yes. Get on the microphone, please.
So part of your testimony was that the northern sector of the cell phone tower captures into that line, right?
That's correct.
And then you put these flat marks, chalk body outlines on it.
That's correct.
Is your testimony that someone from the tower is getting cell phone?
No, that site 2 would not get signal from that tower.
Is your testimony that remain site 1 would get a signal from this phone tower?
It's in the right direction and on the right side of the mountain, and the elevation is good enough to provide signal in that area from my expertise and looking at the terrain in that area.
So what are all the things that block a cell phone signal?
Terrain and obstructions.
Trees?
Trees absorb, they don't block.
Rocks?
Rocks, yes, that's part of terrain.
Ridges?
Depending on where the ridge is.
You have the capacity to include topography on the map.
Yes, one of the other maps has topography on it.
If I could have the slide number 7 or number 8, I believe, discovered 24,000 feet. So there's been testimony that folks get a heat signal to Redwine maps rather than switching to text maps. Does that make sense, given this geographical feature right here included on slide number 8?
Yes,
And that geographical feature between this tower and Mr. Redwine's house pales in comparison to the geographical features that make up this area moving towards the main site. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know what you're pointing to in between the house and the tower there. Do you mind pointing to that again? Yes. So I see that there's some terrain there. And if you're saying there's signal strength enough to the phone to use the tower from the father's residence, that makes sense. The other terrain, it really just depends on how that terrain is going from that tower to the other site. If it be flat or at an angle, or a blockage. Could be any of those.
You would agree that in the topographical map that you used here with no flat lines, these bridges and spots indicate that there's an increase in elevation of the tower up to remain site one.
There is an increase in elevation.
And you've looked at maps of the road. You understand that there's switchbacks and roads would suggest that there are obstacles to those that go around, right?
Yes, that makes sense.
And all of those obstacles interfere with the signal coming from the tower. And similar to that, like this feature is up on signal strength.
I can't say for sure on the obstacles. There's switchbacks, and there's a rock or a part of the mountain in between the tower. It's going to affect it. When I looked at the elevation change from that tower to that first site and to the gate of that Middle Mountain Road, it was a straight upslope.
Sure. And this tower is pointing downward. The antenna has a downward tilt, correct?
Sure.
So this tower, you could say for certain, would serve this area, provide these neighborhoods, nothing between downward tilt, pointing to the neighborhood. Easy to say, very easy.
Yes, sir.
But where we've got increasing elevation, rocks, trees, bridges, things that require switchbacks in the road, all of those things would interfere with the ability to get a signal from this tower, certainly along the park, but also remain site one.
The main site, I agree with the Rama Cart, the one to the west side of the mountain.
Because that's a giant mountain. There's no way it goes around.
I totally agree with that. The elevation is too high, and it's on, and that site location is on the other side of the mountain. But looking at the tower from the first site, it's just a straight elevation up. There are downslopes to towers, but I don't know if there's residences along the west side of this mountain that they might have, tilted that tower a little more straight instead of down, straight, up. But also, you get signal whether it's face down or level to the ground or even up.
Let me just suffice to say you are speculating because you don't know which way the antenna is pointed.
I know which way the antenna is pointed.
I'm sorry. You know that it's pointed to the north, but you don't know that it's not tilted downward or upward, which actually is.
That's correct.
And you didn't have to speculate. You could have gone up here and done broad testing if the assertion was going to get a signal type 1.
I was not able to get...
Judge, that mischaracterized what the witness said. What the witness said was that if there's service in these two areas, it's the same sector. That's what the witness said. Mr. Moran has recharacterized that and now is argumentatively attacking that point, so I object.
I think it's fair cross-examination. Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
You don't know whether there's a signal at remain site 1.
I'm not positive that's correct.
I'll leave it there. So we should rely then on people who've been up there with their phones. They have better information, right?
Up where?
Up to remain site 1.
If they were standing on Remain Site 1 and did some testing, yeah, that would be more accurate for that point in time that testing was done. We don't know back in 2012.
Right. So people who were there in 2012 have better information than what we can gather right now because there's never been drive testing then or now.
That's what I understand. I don't know if anybody else did.
And if I could have the prosecution go back to the previous slide, number 7. This is something that people should be careful in viewing because you've taken out the topography on this one where you drew in the splat marks, right?
It's the topography is not shown here,
And you had the capacity to include topography, right? Because you did it in the other one.
which I did on the next slide.
Sure. But on every one of these where you've included these red splat marks on locations where you're not sure if there's cell phone connectivity, there's no topography.
There's no topography on this slide. I see what you're saying, where those markers are. Those slides don't have topography, so they could have.
If I could have this taken down, please. You analyzed GPS that was on a vehicle Mr. Redwine drove in November and December of 2012, correct?
Yes, I believe that it was his work vehicle.
And with the GPS information, law enforcement was able to see his routes and where he stopped, right?
Yes, this included the dates long after Dylan was missing.
Long after, because it was November and December of 2012.
Yeah, it was later. I mean, long after, and my term was several days after.
Nobody was monitoring that nobody monitoring that GPS ever found evidence of a crime at locations the vehicle stopped, right?
Can you rephrase that question? You said there is no evidence of crimes where that vehicle stopped?
Right. Did anybody go and find that things had been dumped from that vehicle? Well, you were able to see where the route was and where the vehicle stopped, right?
All I did was give the route information to the investigators. I don't know what they did with that.
Suffice to say that you would have reported that to you probably.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I was not involved in the investigation after several days.
The phone data does not contradict Mr. Redwine getting his son Dylan from the airport on November 18th, 2012, right?
That's consistent with that statement.
And then November 19th, 2012, between 8:42 a.m. and 10:15 a.m., Mr. Redwine's phone was using cell sites in Durango, consistent with his claim that he went to Durango to do some errands, right?
That's correct.
And there's nothing to suggest his phone is interacting with the southwest facing sector of the Vallecito Tower after 5:48 p.m. on November 19th. I'm sorry, on November 18th. I can repeat that if you'd like. And may I get a slide up with this tower one more time, please? Page number 10. Sure. Slide number 10. That's slide 10. What exhibit? I thought you were looking at what exhibit. Slide or exhibit 49. Slide 6. Slide 6. 24008. 24006. You know what? I would prefer 51. Can you do that? 51, slide 10. Discovery page 24,010. I'm not certain where you guys have 24,010. Is it slide, or is it 49? Slide, let me try 50. Sure, please. Slide, you want slide 10? Slide 10 on 50? Don't mind. Thank you. So there's nothing to suggest Mr. Redwine's phone is interacting with that south-facing part of the tower after 5:48 on November 18th, 2012, right? No, Coach. Yes.
you mind asking that question again, sir?
After 5:48.
Get on the microphone, please.
After 5:48 p.m., there is no evidence that Mr. Redwine's phone is at the southwest facing sector of that tower, right?
Let me look at the prior slide just to make sure, because that slide goes to 8:11 p.m. And you're saying...
I'm asking about the 18th, though.
Oh, on the 18th, that's
I'm
all.
sorry, I'm just pointing at this slide because I want to give everybody an idea of the last sector of the tower.
So, to make sure I understood your question correctly, we're talking about November 18th at 5-something p.m.?
5:48 p.m., there's no evidence to suggest Mr. Redwine anywhere in this area. Right?
That's correct.
And you would need to pass through this area to get up on the middle mountain, right?
Yes, you would have to pass through that area.
Have received a call, received a text, made a call, or made a text at any point, you would have been able to, from anywhere aside from the north sector, you would have been able to see movement, right?
Correct.
Because you're not sure whether Remain Site 1 gets cell phone connectivity, you're not able to say that whether or not there's data putting Mr. Redwine on Middle Mountain Road, November 18, 2012.
That's correct. The phone uses a tower and sector that faces that direction, but it could cover his residence or Middle Mountain Road.
Trailhead.
I'm sorry, you have to tell me what point you're talking about again?
That's Remain Site 1, the Bear Creek Trailhead.
Okay, and from the tower
Yes, sir.
to that point, I can estimate it for you, but I didn't take a measurement. The maps have scales on them,
Sure.
so you can actually determine it.
But that wasn't anything you included in your report.
No, I didn't measure that point.
That thing that's important in determining connectivity.
Distance has a factor, it doesn't determine it.
Knowing the elevation between the phone and the tower, that's helpful in assessing whether there'd be a signal.
Yes.
You know the difference in elevation between the Five-Cedar Tower and Remain Site 1, Bear Creek Trailhead?
I looked at the elevation and I can't remember the exact change from elevation from the tower to that point, that site. I think it was a couple hundred feet.
But you don't know and didn't include it in your report.
I didn't put that in my report, no.
On slide 24, we see on November 19th, 5 outgoing calls between 2:33 p.m. and 3:47 p.m., right?
You have to refer that, which exhibit and what page number. Are you talking about Dylan's phone or Mark's phone?
Commissioner Coach?
Yes.
Okay, I have the page. Do you mind asking that question again?
We see 5 outgoing calls between 2:33 and 3:47 p.m. Is that right?
So, Judge, I'm just going to ask for a clarification as to what device and phone we're talking about so we have a clear record.
I agree.
It's Mark's phone ending in 8032, right?
That's correct.
And between 2:33, which I think is the first entry there, 3:47, we see him calling out over and over and over again, right?
Three of those, or excuse me, there's one incoming call and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outgoing.
And all 5 of those outgoing calls are to Dylan's phone, right? I beg your pardon, 4 of those 6 are to Dylan.
The first one at 2:33 is an outgoing text message from Mark to Dylan's phone. The next one is outgoing to a different number at 2:41. At 2:57, it is an outgoing call to Dylan's phone. At 3:31, it is an outgoing call to Dylan's phone. And 3:47 is another outgoing call to Dylan's phone.
So if I'm understanding this right, of the 6 you've noted on this page in discovery, 4 are to Dylan's phone from Mark's phone, right?
Yes.
And then there's a 5th entry, and that's Mark texting Dylan, right?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Eicher, I want to clarify a few things. You started to answer a question about tower tilt. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And then you were explaining the significance one way or the other if the tower's tilted. Can you finish that answer for the jury, please?
I sure can. In most cases, the towers in like Denver metro area, they're tilted down, right? They're tilted down because there's no reason to put signal north, or excuse me, up, and because there's no phones up there. So they're pointed down just slightly or level to the ground. Same thing with this tower here in Vallecita. It's an AT&T tower and a comment tower. It's on a higher point. It's going to be tilted down a little bit towards where the customers are, the bulk of the customers. There's also customers, along the west side of that mountain, so they need coverage there. So I don't know what the exact tilt was. It really doesn't matter. That tower is facing north. It'll cover the area of the father's residence. It'll cover parts of Middle Mountain Road, and I can't tell you if it's actually going to cover the first site where remains were found.
Right. What's important to your analysis is whether it covers it or not. We're talking about a single sector, if he's anywhere up there.
That's correct.
And counsel asked you a question about if he drove down and crossed the south sector and then went up to the mountain. Remember that question?
Yes, sir.
Now, what would have to occur for you to actually have location information from that south sector?
Well, if he's coming, let me see if I can explain this. Like, say from his house, he'd have to come south, take Middle Mountain Road past the tower. We only know where his phone is and which sector he's using at times that there's connections to the network, voice calls, text messages, data sessions. And so those are specific points in time. So he could cross through that lower sector or the north-facing sector and not made a connection to the network.
Right. So if he's driving from his house to remain Site 1, he'd have to place a phone call or a text as he crosses the south for you to have any location.
That's correct.
And let's talk more generally. Counsel asked you about this, so let's talk about it. That night in November 18th, was he using his phone at all?
No.
And there was a little data sessions prior to 9:10, right?
Yes.
That's when we know Dylan's still doing some texting.
That's correct.
But after 9:10 till 8:10 the next morning, is he using that phone at all?
Mark's not using his phone. It's making data connections, but it's not being manipulated.
Right. So no calls, no text, and no data usage.
That's correct.
And then that phone, when you're doing your analysis for what you testified to, are you tracking a person or are you tracking a device?
Remember, we're tracking a device.
So if one were to go from their home to a dump site and leave their phone on the kitchen counter, it looks the same.
That's correct.
But here it's going to look the same anyway because the locations are so close.
Object to these,
One, speak up.
leading.
Overruled. Go ahead.
So in this case, because of the two locations being close, and because all he had to do is leave his phone on the counter, we can't say anything about his movement. We can just say about the device.
That's correct.
Now, counsel asked you about several calls placed from the defendant to Dylan Redwine. You recall that?
Yes.
The jury's going to have people 79 and 80, right?
Yes, sir.
And those have highlights in every one of those communications, correct?
That's correct.
Are any of those communications outside the afternoon of November 19th of 2012?
No.
And there's a single call on the 20th to Dylan at 7:19 a.m., but the text that everything counsel was referring to was on November 19th, right?
That's correct.
And those texts tracked him down to Durango, right?
Yes.
And then that's the mapping you did. You were able to see him go down to Durango, back up, down to Bayfield, back up.
That is correct.
Pretty easy to track that trail, right?
Yes, sir.
But then by 7:42 p.m. on the 19th, is it fair to say from those records that he was on calling Dylan?
Yes.
And through the night of the 19th, when his son was missing, there wasn't any activity to indicate that he was even awake on those devices, was there?
Section leading.
You know, that's an argument you can make later. I think that's an argumentative question.
Understood. Anything after 7:42 p.m. on the 19th?
There's no activity on any of the devices.
And certainly, well, let me just ask open-endedly, did he try to call Dylan that night ever?
No.
How about on the 20th? We talked about one call on 7:19 a.m., right?
Your Honor, if I may, this is direct over again. Asked and answered.
You did pretty well emphasize that on direct.
I understand, Judge. Counsel made the point that there were some calls on the 19th. I simply want to point out after the 19th.
That I think you already did.
All right. So based on the information that you have in total here, is there, in fact, a gap on all devices throughout that evening?
Yes.
And then setting aside the 19th altogether, and we have that landmark on the 20th at 7:19 a.m., that's the last time he used any of these devices to try to contact Dylan?
Yes.
And you had records that spanned from, let's just say, were you able to evaluate the rest of November?
Yes.
Any more attempts to contact Dylan's cell phone the rest of November?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from the jury? Counsel? Mr. Eicher, I'm going to ask the questions, but I want you to answer to the jury. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if any towers were built in that area since 2012, and if so, where?
I do not know that answer. I did not look at, after this time frame, to any new towers to the present.
All right. And the second question is how many times did Mark Redwine call or text, and I'm assuming this is Dylan, during the day of November 19th, 2012?
There were 5 text messages. I'm sorry, 4 text messages on the 19th, ranging from 8:42 a.m. to 2:33 p.m.
And any regular phone calls on that day?
That's what I'm looking at
Okay.
next, Turner. There were 7 on the 19th, voice calls.
Any follow-up from you, Sam?
Briefly. So those are all the calls that you were able to map.
That's correct.
And those were all the calls that showed that he went into town and showed that he came back out and showed that he went to the marshal's office and showed that he went home.
That is correct.
And then after he went home, efforts ceased based on the timing of what you just reviewed?
Yes.
Thank you.
I've gotten the exhibit scrambled enough that all I can say is it's discovery page 24,000.
Can you give me another indication in terms of
Slide number 8.
incoming phone?
Mark Redwine's phone, 8032. What page is the exhibit? Oh no, it's slide number 8. So on this document, it's recorded that there are 8 text messages and 8 voicemail messages, or voice calls, I guess. Have you seen that?
Yes, I do.
Who are they to?
I think you asked this question earlier. I can look at each call
And that's been
and
answered.
You know, there were additional calls or texts besides the ones that Dylan had that.
yes,
Their testimony. Do you need more than that?
I'm going to double check this 4 text messages thing. That's your testimony, right?
I'm sorry, sir?
Your testimony is that there were only 4 text messages?
To Dylan.
To Dylan from Mark on November 19th.
Let me recount those. I'm looking at People's Exhibit 80, which is the text messages for Mark's phone.
What page number you got for that?
It's Exhibit 80, page 17, first page of it. It's discovered page number 25948. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 outgoing texts on the 19th.
I'm sorry, how many did you say?
I'm counting them right now, sir. Just 4 on the 19th outgoing texts.
Thank you. That's it, thanks.
Will this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, I think we should.
I'll just leave these up here.
Oh, please do. Just know. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to surprise you, but it looks like this is a good time to stop for the weekend. I do want you guys to think about, I know I've gotten some reports that there may be some interest in going back to the hour-and-a-half lunch. We're still on track time-wise. If it works out better for you and things you have to do during the lunch hour, that's fine. If not, I'm happy to do that hour and 15 minutes. You guys can think about it, talk to each other Monday morning, and maybe report to Cindy about it. Tuesday, excuse me, I guess Monday's off. So with that, we'll break for the day. I hope you have a nice Thanksgiving, but before we go, I'll go through all the admonitions again. You know, the problem is when you're doing two things at once, sometimes my mouth doesn't catch up with my brain or the other way around. Please don't discuss this case either amongst yourselves or with anyone else during the course of the trial. Do not initiate, post, or respond to anything about this case on social media. In fairness to the parties to this lawsuit, you should keep an open mind throughout the trial, and you should reach your decision only during final deliberations. Do not permit any third person to discuss this case in your presence. If anyone attempts to do so, please report that to me. Do not gather any information on your own. Do not engage in any outside reading on this case. Do not attempt to visit any places. Don't read about the case in the newspaper, obtain any information on the radio, television, internet, social media, or other media source. Don't try and learn about this in any way. As you're gathering on the 4th of July with friends and family, there will probably be some pressure on you guys to talk about what's going on in here. Make sure you resist that. You don't want to have to do this over. It's been a long time. And some of us will be upset if that happens. Okay? So with that, have a good weekend. Everybody right? We'll be in recess for the weekend.
Thank you, Your Honor. Have a great holiday.
You too.